Does doing back squats bother your low back? Well, you're not alone. Back squats actually tend to be one of the higher risk exercises for re-aggravation of lower back conditions if you have a history of a grumpy or weak lower back. So the question remains, why are we doing them? Or if you are going to do them, how should you do them? According to the World Health Organization, lower back pain is the single leading cause of disability worldwide. They go on to say that it can be dealt with good old-fashioned physical activity and maintaining a healthy body weight. Next, I asked ChatGPT what percentage of people in the US experience lower back pain after performing barbell back squats. They went on to say, studies show that back pain is a leading issue in strength training, and approximately 80% of people will experience lower back pain at some point in their lives. Squats are often highlighted as a potential trigger when performing with poor form or excessive weights. The whole thing seems kind of odd, right? In order to get better, you need to be engaging in strength activities. But while you're doing that, you need to also engage in activities that could potentially make you feel worse, such as back squatting. While it seems counterintuitive, I'm going to show you how to address all this in the video today. Today, we're not just talking about risk. We're also talking about how to identify risk factors and how to get squatting safely back into your program, even though you've had bad experiences in the past. I'm Sebastian. Before we get into the actual back squatting demonstration, we need to ask the most important question of all. Should you be back squatting at all? I did a simple YouTube search where YouTube auto-fills the topics that most people look for. As you can see, I searched lower back pain while ... and the prompt generated these suggestions, and squatting was at the top of the list, meaning millions of people on YouTube are actually searching for this because they're having problems with squatting. So we have to wonder, there's so much controversy about this, is it actually something that's good for you to do? Personally, I don't think everybody needs to add back squatting back into their fitness program. Even world-renowned strength coach Mike Boyle posted a video on the topic in 2010 that created a lot of controversy on the online forums of if we should add back squatting back into the programs. The debate continues today. My personal belief is that not all programs need it because of the person's unique goal. If you need to get back into a barbell sport, yes, we need to include it back in. But if you're trying to just be physically able, age well, look good, so on, we don't always need it. Even ChatGPT offered a suggestion of an alternative lift, such as a goblet squat, when I asked that first question. However, if the goal is to get as strong as humanly possible, then yes, you will probably need to add a back squat back into your program. Mainly because the barbell is a tool that we can load very, very heavy while we can't with other implements. While I'm not saying don't back squat, I personally choose to de-emphasize it with a lot of the clients that I work with. Now that you've made the decision to add it back in, let's cover the 3 basic faults that you should be looking for. The top 4 issues you'll experience are knees not over toes, butt wink, also known as a posterior pelvic tilt, and the good morning squat, which is the hips rising faster than the chest. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see experienced lifters make is pushing their knees out. Why does this happen? Because you've been coached that way. Knees out, knees out, knees out, knees out, knees out, which is a terrible cue. And what it does is actually it decreases the amount of force you can produce from the ground, which I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. For beginner lifters, what I see is the opposite. I see excessive knees in. The knees in because they're either weak or they have very little experience doing the lift in general. Also, that's the way gravity takes your knees. The reason why knee and foot alignment is so important to be stacked amongst each other is because when you reverse the amount of force you're putting into the ground, it should be an upward movement. This is not really encouraging an upward movement, okay? And so we're gonna cover in a moment here how rooting actually encourages more activity of the leg. It can help out with ground reactive force. Now, when you're learning rooting, essentially rooting is as if your feet grew roots all throughout them and they're burying themselves into the floor, okay? And that includes all parts of the foot, which is why things like pushing the knees out doesn't work, because you can see as I do this, it deroots this inside part. The same thing with the knees caving. And so my friend Cody DMAC has a really great cue for this or scenario. He says, when you're at the beach and you're in the wet sand, try to wiggle your feet down into the sand. And as you do this wiggle, you can kind of feel your feet grip the floor. And so my feet are gripping right now. And now that I'm here, I'm not gonna lose this tension at any point. It's like my feet have grown roots into the floor. And I'm gonna keep that tension and try to open the floor rotationally, not sideways, rotationally as I squat down, okay? What this does is it creates really great tension through the floor, and it gives me the opportunity to really root to the floor to be able to push away from the floor better. Notice that my feet are completely in contact in the forward and backwards part too, and as you go down, You can use this with a squatting pattern or even a hip hinge or deadlift pattern, which we covered on the other videos. The next thing we gotta tackle is the infamous social media butt wink, which is actually no more than the posterior pelvic tilt expressing itself as you start to come down through the squat. You get the loss of the neutral pelvis. This rotation occurs and the spine flattens. This is why it couples with lumbar spine flexion, which is a no-no when you're under load, such as a back squat, which is what leads to injuries such as lumbar spine strains, disc issues, or more, with severe complications in people with poor back strength and mobility. Now let's not confuse the butt wink with the loss of upper torso posture, which I'll show you on this dowel, which we're gonna use as a teaching tool a little later on, so you're gonna hang around for that one. But at least you can find out that if you attach this thing to your butt crease, mid-back, and head, you can find out where and what you start to lose posture in. If you're losing posture in the bottom half, down here, you can see daylight between my bum and the stick now. That's losing the pelvis neutral position, which is a butt wink. And then now we have a loss of the upper part, which is a loss of upper torso posture, which can be helped out with various different exercises and building strength in that region. But let's get back to the butt wink for now. The good news is that evidence shows that maintaining a neutral pelvic position during a squat increases activity of the erector group, the oblique muscles, which helps ensure optimal muscular support for the squat itself while handling heavy loads and reducing the risk of back injury in general. But the question remains, how do you get rid of butt wink? Well, there's 4 different things that I would suggest trying before you lose hope. Number 1 is decreasing the depth of your squat. Number 2 is improving ankle mobility. Number 3 is patterning the motion better using a dowel. The 4th is building more internal pressure, or IAP, to help out with supporting the squat in general. Now, I would try to do all 4, honestly. The first one is pretty self-explanatory. Don't go as low or go to a bench. The second and third I'll show you right now. The 4th, with intra-abdominal pressure, I'll show you a little bit later in this video. As you can see, if I just don't go as low, I have less butt wink. That's number 1. But next in this section of the video, I'm going to show you how I would address the other 3 parts of those bullet points. Now, as you can see, elevating my heels on a plate does help decrease butt wink, but this is a synthetic way of doing better ankle mobility. Fortunately, there's ways to improve ankle mobility, and I'll show you right now. I think one of the simplest ways to improve ankle mobility is to actually just expose it to ankle mobility. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people don't put themselves into this position other than a deep squat during the day. So what we can do is we can actually take a bench or a box and then get ourselves into the position here, period. You can rock in and out a little bit just to expose it, but if you really wanted to, you can try to drive adaptation and get your body to acquire and keep the position longer by providing some overpressure, almost simulating the weight of the actual squat. So you can do this and grab a bench or the sides of this, and you try to pull yourself down through the block. As you can see, I have ankle dorsiflexion with it. Now, if I go this way too, you can see slight variations on this too. Again, if we want to drive adaptation, obviously we want to see if we can do it with the knee over toe in this scenario here, versus being out here or in here. So if you're going to go here, lean in, full foot contact, not just the toes, and pull yourself down really hard for about 5 to 10 seconds, and then back off. Now, the other way to do it is actually to use an exercise to emphasize the point too. I'm a big fan of actually using exercise or movement as a way to drive mobility. So if we're gonna do this, we might as well pick something like a split squat. By the way, if you have limited toe motion, this also gets a big old bonus back there, because as people start to age, their toes don't actually extend. You should check yourself and see if you're like one of this guy right here. So let's see if you can actually get those toes on the floor. Lean your body weight over a full foot contact. You wanna make sure you have all of the mud around your entire foot, not just your toes, in this position before you actually rise, okay? So you can hang out in this position just for a little bit, or you can try to make it for reps. Now, one thing you wanna make sure to be considerate of is make sure that this back foot's not too far away, because if your foot's anchored back there, notice that my toe's not actually over, or my knee's not actually over my toes. So you can bias it a little bit more towards ankle dorsiflexion if you actually start in that position and get really heavy in it. You can actually use weights in this too and make it a workout. Now, when we use a patterning drill such as a dowel to help out with finding and reducing butt wink, you can also use something like a cell phone or a book. And so this one is, it's funny, patterning exercises, a lot of times people use them way too much in my opinion. Ideally, you get in and get out. Like you do about 10 reps and you got it or you don't. And if not, you got to find a new coaching style to actually show you something better. Usually patterning is pretty simple, but you can use an external focus like your phone right here, attach it to your bum, right about there, right below belt line, flat of the hand, just like so. That way you're not grabbing your phone and cheating, mid-back and head contact. And now I'm gonna squat as deep as I can, and I'm gonna know, you can let the dowels kind of slide down a little bit because you tend to lose the cell phone a little bit with the pants. But as long as I have the cell phone, I don't have a butt wink. So how low can I go before I lose my phone? And that's the depth that I can tolerate, at least at this point in time with this. Now I can try a little bit more with an anterior load and it may help a little bit better, but at least I would try about 10 reps of a dowel patterning exercise to see if you can get lower and lower. You may find out you can get quite a bit lower, and that'll carry over into your exercise actually. Bullet point 4, or intra-abdominal pressure, is going to be covered in this coming section where we talk about the good morning squat, AKA the forward lean. What is a good morning squat? Well, let's take a look at it right here. It's when the hips and chest don't rise at the same rate. In fact, you can see my hips rising faster than my chest, essentially making it look like I'm doing a good morning exercise. Now, the problem is not the good morning exercise itself. The problem is you have a lot more weight on a back squat than you do a good morning. So that's quite a bit of load on the spine. The main reason this happens, other than just going too low in general, is because people lose tension. Tension is required throughout the entire body in the entire exercise to actually protect the spine in the exercise itself. Before we cover how to improve tension in your back squat, why don't we talk about first the system that we're activating while we're doing so. In the last section, we talked about improving your intra-abdominal pressure. Now, that's different than bracing. Let me explain. I think the best way to imagine the armor system around your spine is actually more of like the knight's armor. We have 3 different layers of armor, generally speaking. Number 1 is the gambit, which is like diaphragmatic breathing. It's a padding the knight wears just before they put on their armor. The next one is the chainmail, which is synonymous with intra-abdominal pressure, or IAP. It's still very movable, but it does provide a lot of protection. The last one is going to be hard armor, which is going to be analogous to the brace. All these armor systems can help out to improve your spinal stability to decrease potential of low back injury. If you're wondering about how to improve your padding or the gambit through diaphragmatic breathing, we have other videos to come on our channel about that topic. Check in the corner of the video or the description for a link on that. Now's a fantastic time to show you guys the intra-abdominal pressure part, which is the chainmail. Now, if I push my hands in my side right here, I got this webbing right here. Okay, I'm gonna push in, and right now I don't really have a lot of intra-abdominal pressure. I probably have my gambit on, my diaphragmatic breathing, right? But it's not quite stiff enough to really tolerate forces in a lift. So what I can do is create outward pressure here, which for a lot of you experiencing lower back discomfort while you're doing the lifts, this is probably gonna be enough to be a super game changer for you. But notice that it's not so much effort that I'm actually not able to speak to you. That's the big difference between what a lot of people end up doing. They think that they should completely flex like this and not be able to speak the entire time, or they've been told to suck their belly button in and get thin. Actually, those are inadequate forms, or they're different forms. The flexing part is going to come as you start to bend the bar or turn the floor. I'll show you that a little bit when we get there. But you need to put on your chainmail first before you put on your hard armor, or else there's too much compression associated to it. Intra-abdominal pressure is super helpful for decompressing the spine because you press against it and then it pulls up. It creates a decompressive force, and it combats against the compressive force associated to the hard armor and the lift itself. But also, think of this, there's no muscle in the front of the spine that stops it from flexing forward. The only thing here is a pressure area, and that's why it's so supportive. Now, before you put on your hard armor, remember you have to put on your chainmail first, okay? Create that outward pressure, and we talked about the rooting already. The rooting is putting on your hard armor for the lower half. However, the top half of me is still kind of slack, so I need to actually pull the bar down like I'm gonna bend the bar over my back. When I do all of this, and I pull myself down into the squat and push myself away from the floor, and I pull myself down into the squat and I push myself away from the floor, that actually is the hard armor. So the hard armor comes in the form of what you do to the environment, what you do to the bar and what you do to the floor. I know it sounds super simple and basic, but it kind of is. Now you're gonna notice as soon as you start to put on your armor and you pull the bar down and push the floor away, you're gonna notice that you actually start to shake. And it's almost like the lift becomes harder because you're generating tension versus the weight itself. And that's okay in the beginning. Think of tension as a dimmer switch now. In the beginning, a lot of you don't actually have a lot of ability to dial up the tension. So let's work on tension first and then dial the tension back appropriately to the task involved. If you have lower weights, do a little less tension, but right now let's work on tension first. Now, what does this do to the good morning squat? Well, it just kind of stops it. You're gonna notice that actually if you drive through the floor and create tension through the bar, it's going to stop all that from happening on its own. Now, how do you put all this stuff together? Well, I'd probably go to the gym and find first a dowel, find out if you have any deficiencies with the wink or the torso lean and so on. In the worst case scenario on the first day, you just start with the dowel. It is hard to go through slow squats with the dowel, especially if you haven't been to the gym in a while. Now, once you're getting to the bar again, just start with an empty bar. There's no problem with spending a week on an empty bar, generating high time under tension. I guarantee these skills will pay off in dividends later. Later, make sure that you have the appropriate amount of reps and sets. I asked a good buddy, is there any scenario where you would do 50 back squats heavy? And he said, absolutely not. That is a problem with a lot of times people using these exercises. Their volume is inappropriate. The gambling man inside me says that if you're using a back squat, still, you're trying to get very strong. If you're trying to get very strong, your reps are not going to be very high. In fact, they're probably going to be below 8, probably above 3 and below 8, somewhere around there. I guess you're probably not going to do more than 25 reps of this lift in your set, and you're going to take a lot of break between your sets. Considering all that, you need to make sure that you have the skill sets. You need to make sure that you're responsible with loading the bar, because if you have not been lifting in a while, consider that your upper back may be a limiting factor. Your lower back spinal recti muscles may be a limiting factor. Your hips may be too stiff. Give yourself a chance to adapt to the lift if you're going to keep it around, and make sure that your dosage and volume is not abused. If you're struggling with lower back discomfort, getting back into the gym and finding what exercises work for you, reach out. We'd love to help you. We have virtual sessions and all of our contact is below in the description. Subscribe to the channel and please like the video if you learned anything useful at all. Take care.